further ado, we present Gemcast Live number 5. And let's get to it.
Absolutely. This is from our own friend Tyranidlord over here, the absolutely awesome brosif that he is. This is from his series, by the way. I need to do my screen share on here, by the way. Someone didn't tell me I was not doing a screen share. How dare you guys? Alright, boom. There we go. How dare you? Now we have screen share up live. I apologize for not having that earlier. So, this is from the series The Dragon Blood King. The story is The Agent of Shadow. This is Chapter 1, Dragon Slayer. Jor, za, frul. The pulses of raw energy swept through the dew-soaked grass, caressing and sending shivers of gleaming droplets sparkling in the morning sun. Startled, flocks of birds took flight, their confusion chasing the echoes of power as they took to the skies and fled from the source. Game lifted their heads, eyes widening as their instincts took control and they followed the path of the winged creatures in their attempts to put as much distance between them and the cataclysmic battle that their home was suddenly host to. From the endless cliffs that split the clouds with their height, to the rolling plains and forests, the Thum touched everything with its might, pulverizing the endless waterfalls into rainbow-filled clouds of mist, shaking the pines and oaks to the roots, and causing the land to shiver. Not a single being or piece of the endless landscape was untouched by the power, drawing the attention of all, while at the same time filling their souls with the desire to flee. Jor za frul! Each word struck the land like a giant smiting hammer, slamming with incomprehensible force until air, rock, and soil shuddered and buckled under the onslaught. The power was almost unlike anything that had touched this land before. A literal power of creation, and the song of reality itself made manifest by the souls of mortals. The words were Dovazul, the ancient tongue of the draconic beings from before time. And yet, they were not words. They were meaning, intent, and understanding, themes of comprehension spliced into reality that could change the world with nothing but will. Even here in this place, beyond the scope of mortal lives, the words and meanings held sway as Sovngarde felt the touch of the Thum. Jorza! Frul! The words were joined with others of their kind, spoken by a being whose species had given birth to such means of tonal architecture, but they were struggling to have the same effect as those used against it. The intent and understanding of the words from a draconic consciousness crashed against the waves with their own emotion and fury, until reality threatened to rip apart like shredded cloth. It was impossible not to feel the might of the creature that was the center of the growing storm of unfathomable energies, and the realm of the honored dead was little more than an observer to a truly unique event. Through time and space, Alduin had been hunted, and even here, within the Nordic afterlife, he had failed to shake off his pursuer. It was here, where he was at his strongest, having slaked his thirst for power by feasting upon the numerous souls of those who had died in combat. But it was still not enough. Jul zu fral! Each word of the Thum was intent with meaning. The understanding and power of reality. Yol meant fire. but didn't describe fire. It was fire. It was the heat and the ravenous hunger that opened flames. And as such, the words that were being hurled at the firstborn of Akatosh were not what they had been before. They were intent, meaning, understanding, and concepts weaponized against a being that was impervious to the crafts of men and mer alike. But despite the concepts and meanings of Jur-Zu-Frul being Dova in nature, they were not how the Dova understood them. They had been tainted, corrupted, and twisted by design into something more than what they once were. The concepts were changed, the meaning skewed and mutilated into something foreign, alien, and horrific to the immortal Dove. To the Dove, Jur had been the mortals, the beings that had not been blessed with eternity, like the dragons, and doomed to live their minuscule lives on Nirn. They were like insects, tiny, short, lived, and fragile, but now they were proving they had their stings. Jur was now the true meaning of mortal, from a mortal's perspective. No longer did it mean the simple beings that the dragons had enslaved, but mortality itself. The understanding of such a concept of life, death, and afterlife, and the cycle it represented was not incomprehensible to a being who was literally a fragment of creation and time. Jur was now the fear of death, the joy of creating life, the sorrow of burying a child, of mourning a lost love. It was the pain of a body giving in to death and sickness, of suffering through existence only to lose it all at the end of a life as the merest flicker of flame in the long darkness of eternity. Za's purest meaning was finite, but like Jor, it had too been corrupted by mortal will. Za spoke of limitations, of the finite nature in all things, the finite time that all living being existed, whether they were alive or dead. It spoke of starvation and loss, of famine and desolation of life. There was coiling traces of greed and despair leaching into the word, the sensations of never having enough, the never-ending fight for survival of beings that were always 1 foot in the grave. Afterlife, even one as Sovngarde, with its unlimited fields of honey and game, would never be enough for the countless war dead. And even if it was, existence never lasted forever. Perhaps even more than the other two words, Frul had been twisted far beyond its original meaning. Frul had once been used to describe the mortal races, but was now being turned against the Dove. Temporary, ephemeral, fleeting, short-lived and brief, the mortal races would never, should never, have proposed a threat to immortality of dragonkind, but this very nature was being used as a weapon. Frul now spoke of the mortal lives that had flared and vanished in the darkness. It spoke of the lives cut short and lost to the winds of Aetherius by plague, war, disease, and famine. It spoke of the lives cut short, like a Luna moth that had unfurled its wings during sunset only to die without seeing a single dawn. All things came to an end, and no matter whether it was life or reality itself, only the Dove were immune. Alduin represented but one of many ends of reality itself, consuming the world to allow the wheel of time to turn another temporary existence, but now the full weight of what that meant and represented to those living such an existence crashed hard into the great worm's consciousness. Jur, za, fru. The land heaved once more, and again, the pulsing waves of meaning rippling through everything within range, within its deadly force. Grass blackened and died from the intensity of the hate and understanding that had been fused into the shout. Trees crumbled into rotting dust, and those few animals and insects that had not yet managed to flee to a safe distance were cast down as broken husks. In those few moments, the full meaning of mortal, finite, temporary fused itself into Sovngarde's eternal, spiritual nature, and corrupted it within range of the pulsating might of Tyranidlord. In the very heart of the maelstrom, within the crescendo of energies, the target of Dragonrend finally succumbed to the combination of the Thum and the mortal crafts. The blood of the greatest dragon of them all. The firstborn of Akatosh stained the Thum-scoured soil, and the shriek of the untold agonies whipped the dust into a frenzy, as Alduin's life was ripped from his physical form, shuddering and writhing. The giant dragon, roared as its adversary jammed the elvish sword to the hilt into, and through the scale and bone and brain, the physical attack finally finding a chink in Alduin's thumbed, weakened form. The dying breath of the World Eater exploded out with the force of dying realities in a wave of power, unlike even the greatest of Thums. Far above them, and the clouds were blasted into nothingness from the raw pulse of the power, revealing the infinite skies and the mountainous cliffs that continued on for eternity, and a dust storm greater than any on Nirn stripped the land bare. This time, the shudder that rolled through the land was not one of great reality-breaking energies, but that of the Lord of Dragons slamming down hard in death. Gore flooded out of the wound in its skull and the numerous others that had been inflicted by its adversaries, and with a last shuddering gasp, the last of its life flooding out in a breath of misted blood. Exhausted, battered, and bleeding, Caius retched back hard on his Aelid blade, Sky Power, twisting it free from the scaled flesh and promptly falling backwards. It had taken all of his considerable strength, his full vampiric abilities, and almost his entire life to succeed, but he had done it. Alduin was finally defeated, and he struggled to rise as the worm's body settled in death. There was no doubting the majesty of Akatosh's firstborn. The midnight scales, and the sheer size, was overwhelming. And even compared to the rest of his kind, Alduin was stronger, larger, and more deadly than any of the lesser Dove. But now he was dead, and Caius was still alive, albeit wounded, and so tired. Despite all, he was once again victorious. Even as he struggled to rise, he could see the body barely even an arm's span away, the sleek, oil-like scales beginning to shimmer and twist like heat rising from desert sands. The blood was shifting and changing, boiling away as the flesh and The remains began to follow suit, slowly like a dam breaking under the strain of a flooded river. Its might, the body began to pulse and dissolve, the scales sloughing away like a boiling tar, muscles and ligaments splitting and burning away from the ebony skeleton. Despite the rending of flesh and scales, there was no storm of lights that erupted from the battered corpse, no roaring soul energies that were absorbed into his being. And Caius watched as the body of his foe was shredded by reality's pull. It didn't take long for the skeleton before the skeleton had been picked free by elemental forces. But soon, that too rippled and faded and disintegrated into nothingness, until all that was left was the scar on the afterlife from the battle. "He's dead," exclaimed one of Caius's comrades as he staggered upright. "It's done." "Alduin is defeated," another added, and the crutch of the Thu'um blasted soil echoed loudly in the post-battle silence as they moved closer. "It is truly over." "His soul," Caius rasped, spitting out a mouthful of blood and a loosened tooth into the grave-like soil. Whether the tooth had been loosened as a result of the time when Alduin had struck a glancing blow with his tail, or from the horrendous power of the dragon-rend shout, he didn't know. But his mind was filled with concern for other matters. I didn't absorb his soul. A hand clad in thick mail mitten hovered in front of his face, and he grasped it, allowing his comrade to help him to his feet. "None of us expected you to," said the warrior to his face, beaming with joy of victory over an enemy that had been both Caius's and his own. Alduin was a dragon, and yet not a dragon. He is defeated, but there is no way for you or anything else to become whole with such a being. His grin was a mouthful of pick-stained teeth, but Caius grasped the long-dead Nord on the shoulder and painfully rose to his full height, hawk in one eye, and his fellow tongues had aided Caius in the battle. And it had proved that the joining of such masters of the Thu'um had been enough to match Alduin's abilities. Even compared to Caius's achievements, the three long-dead Nordic heroes were incomparable legends. Hakon, Gormlaith Goldenhilt, and Faeldir the Old had been the first mortals that Parthrux had taught the Thu'um, and faced Alduin thousands of years before. It had not been the individuals responsible for casting him forward in time to save the world. They had not been enough to defeat him in the Merithic era, but they had been instrumental in assisting Caius, and they surrounded him with triumphant expressions. So was it truly over? All three nodded, their own smiles and injuries visible, but unlike Caius, theirs were healing quickly. Such was the nature of the honored dead within Sovngarde, and even something like being bitten in half for a second time in Gormalith's case hadn't been able to stop the likes of them. The Nordic shield maiden smiled, with the latest wound from hip to shoulder sealing before Caius's eyes, nodding off in the distance to the impossibly sized mead hall that dominated the horizon. "You better brace yourself." "What? Why?" Caius's exhaustion was almost complete, and it took the sound of someone running toward him to finally register her words and begin to turn. "Caius, you son of a bitch! You did it. You killed Alduin." It was less of a bear hug and more of a flying tackle, as the individual wrapped his arms around the wounded champion and lifted him off his feet. The three masters of the Thum had stepped away, with amazement plastered over their faces at the sight of the badly battered Caius getting picked up by another long-dead Nord, especially after he grunted in pain as he received a congratulatory slap on the shoulder. "I am hurting a little, you know," he said as the Nord finally put him back down. "When are you not?" There was no removing the all-too-familiar cheerful expression off Tyr's face as he grasped Caius firmly by the shoulder and looked over the way that his armor was now closer to scrap metal. "The big lizard definitely did a number on you, didn't he?" "He came close a few times," Caius admitted, grasping the hand of one of his closest friends, and finally breaking into a smile. Tyr was not the only fallen soul who was moving toward them. The Hall of Valor, the home of the honored dead, was emptying into the wake of the battle, and the numbers were already beyond counting. Tyr, and a handful of others, had been the first to rush toward Caius, seeking out the man that they had known in life, and Caius couldn't help but smile at the familiar faces. "But you did it. You won. The tales that are going to be told, the songs that will be sung, and the mead. Gods above, this is going to be some party." Wrapping an arm around Caius's shoulders, he nodded in the direction of the thousands approaching, with a conspiratorial gleam in his eye. Not to mention the women either. Of all the figures and souls of those who had died in battle, there was one that did not belong in their number, and it was this being that Caius's remaining eye rested upon as he approached. The man was a true giant of an individual, towering over twice the height of all those within Sovngarde, and wearing nothing more than the animal furs covering his legs and waist. The sheer power of the being was more than enough to show his godly nature, let alone the aura of intensity that washed over them as he approached. "I can't stay, Tyr." A truthful sadness infused every word, but Caius spoke them aloud, without hesitation. "I don't belong here." True sadness broke through the Nordic blade's expression, a sadness that mirrored the one that he had worn during his death at the hands of the Dremora Reeve those years before. "What? Of course you belong here. You just killed the World Eater." "It was a mighty deed," rumbled the giant as he approached the small group, as the departed souls began surrounding the battle site. "They will sing of this battle in Shor's Hall forever." But Caius is right. His fate lies elsewhere. "Where? In Cold Harbor with Mogul Bal?" spat Tyr forcibly. He and many of the others were looking at Soon, Shield Thane of the god Shor, and he certainly wasn't alone in looking ready to stand between him and Caius if it came to it. "If you think that bastard is going to have my soul, if Alduin couldn't claim it, then you are even more thick-headed dead than alive." A mouthful of blood coughed its way out of Caius's mouth as he patted Tyr on the back. "I'll be fine." Despite the triumph of the task, there was a growing darkness surrounding Caius, and it was impossible not to feel the deepening mood. Even after such an event, and his vampirism, Caius was not technically dead, and only those who had died in battle would find themselves in Sovngarde. He knew it. Tyr knew it. And all others knew it, and there weren't many who were happy about the fact. "I almost pity the rape prince when you finally complete your count of days," Soon stated. His voice was thunderous with its intensity. "If it comes to pass, and I and the dead of Sovngarde may welcome you again, and bid you join the blessed feasting." Struggling to hold back his emotions, Tyr gritted his teeth, glanced at Caius with a hint of his characteristic nature, and gave a smile. I guess there it is again, then. It was good to see you again, even if it was for a brief time. Both of them gripped their arms together tightly, smiling grimly, even as Tyr's expression again turned to one of amusement. "All hail the Dragonborn!" he bellowed, just as Caius realized what he was about to do. "Hail him with great praise!" The answering cry from uncountable battle dead could have drowned out even the mightiest Thum, rocking after the afterlife to the very core. Struggling to hold his own emotions in check, Tyr nodded in once, seeing the emotion reflected in his friend's remaining eye, and forcing a smile on his face. "You better look after yourself on Nirn. Don't I always?" Moving slightly away, Caius grinned at Tyr, and saw a sea of familiar, smiling faces of men and women who he had known through his life. Legionaries, blades, comrades in arms and friends were present, and were now witnesses to just one of his greatest victories. The pain he was feeling had nothing to do with the injuries that Alduin had inflicted. It was just the agony of loss and loneliness, of the knowledge that for the second time he was bidding farewell to many who he had and still called friend, quite likely for the final and last time. The first of the tongues was close by, close enough to show that they had taken part, but they had not been solely responsible for Alduin's ultimate defeat. They knew this and accepted this, but now they could be of assistance once again. "If you ever need help, you know where to find it," Feldir said as he and his fellow tongues moved around Caius, until he was in the center of them. "It has been an honor fighting beside your side. I might just take you up on that offer." There was a rumbled laugh from the assembled crowds, but Caius' expression was as somber as his tone. Nodding to each other, the three Nordic tongues prepared themselves, controlling their breathing, and preparing themselves to use the Thum once more. Standing in the heart of their formation, and surrounded by the countless honored dead, Caius relaxed, feeling the warring emotions of victorious elation and crushing loneliness within him as he prepared for what was to come next. Dil Dal Vus! End of chapter.
Wow, that was awesome. Like, yeah, I agree with Guo, the pronunciation and like all these difficult words. Like, yeah, that was spectacular. It was so entertaining.
It's very helpful, guys, because this particular type of story is obviously pulled from Skyrim, or Skyrim inspired, correct, Tyr? And a lot of these words you hear very closely in Skyrim, and if you read the story of Skyrim itself, the Thum is exactly that. It's not just language; it's language of creation spoken into fact. And when you use that, it's coming from the very base of your throat. And they explain this very thoroughly in the story of Skyrim, is that they're speaking existence into reality, and it's coming from the very back of your throat. It's that deep pulling of everything. It's pulling your essence into life. And so I am thankful that I played Skyrim, so I knew what this was about. And I hope that I did a good job for you guys on that thing.
I mean, like I was definitely impressed. So everybody, like, get your questions ready. Like, Tier, why don't we hear from you? Like, what did you think?
Yep. Hopefully you guys can hear me. If so, g'day all. That was holy shit.
Thank you. Hey, thank you for the story, though. It was very engaging. You kept the pace very well, and I do hope that I know I fumbled around a little bit here or there, but I do hope that I did a good job for everything.
It was bloody awesome. I even picked up a few grammar issues that I had in there, so that definitely helped.
Uh, Thank you.
Yeah. No, but yeah. One of the points I will say straight off the bat. Oh, yep, you were right. Obviously, it's all Skyrim. It is a fan fiction. This one though is the very first chapter of a third series of mine. So even though that it's the first chapter, there is still a fair bit of the characters, the concepts, like the character tier. Caius has obviously gone through heaps of the. He's the main character through the entire series. Alduin's introduced, Sovngarde's introduced. So there's a lot of concepts that were introduced in the earlier sections through the rest of the stories. But this is very much the hook chapter for the third series for a trilogy.
I think it does a great job. I mean, to me, when I'm reading this, I'm hooked into the drama of it, of the weight of it all. But I'm also thinking to myself, is perhaps this particular book kind of like I'm always careful when I reference like some other media in case you have negative emotions of that media, but it almost feels like free run, like potentially we're going into a free run story of like the story after the story. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's a really
Well,
cool angle.
that's 100% it. Like the very first chapter here, Alduin is the big bad. He's the BBEG of Skyrim, and this chapter is him being defeated. So typically, this is the end of the story. So I'll leave all the connotations to that.
No, that's plenty cool because like I didn't think I would be interested in stories like that, but after watching the anime series of season 1 of Free Run, The Journey Beyond, and really I didn't understand that I would be interested in that because it's like, well, the journey's over. But no, the journey just began because now you have to figure out what life is like afterwards, you know? So, pardon if that's a wrong angle, but Guo has a question right there if you can read it for us, Aiden.
Yeah, so can you speak on the characters that, like you already touched on it briefly, can you speak on the characters that would have been introduced prior to this chapter, obviously in the prior books, and a little bit about them and like, how, so we can appreciate this chapter more?
Yeah, so the two main characters in this is definitely Caius and Tyr. Caius is the main character of all three of my series. He's been in over a million words now. I may have a condition when it comes to fan fiction, um, but Tyr had a he has a very integral role in my first Skyrim series, Blood of Dragons. Even though he's technically only in for a couple of chapters, his impact on Caius, who Caius is, Caius's motivations, are actually felt through the entire series. I won't go into any spoilers too much, but Caius has an amulet of Talos. The In the Elder Scrolls lore, Talos is a god of mankind, similar to Akatosh. And that amulet, you find out later on, is actually Tyr's amulet that he's been carrying with him for decades. So obviously, something happens. Tyr has ended up in the afterlife, where you have to die in battle to arrive to. So you should be able to put two and two together there. And Caius is still technically alive. So there's definitely some things happen in Blood of Dragons. But it's a bit of a purposely included him because Tyr is an interesting character. He is an actual character from the Elder Scrolls universe, from the card game Elder Scrolls Legends, but heavily expanded on in my series.
We have a question
Lucia
from Lucia.
asks, yeah, Lucia asks, like, since this is fan fiction, how does your personal experience shape your version of the story that's, no, coming from the original source?
Oh boy. I've got a fair bit pushed into this. I'm ex-military, ex-Australian Army. So a lot of my experiences, or a lot of experiences that I've seen, known from mates and that sort of stuff, have been incorporated into my writing in one form or another. It could be as basic as like military tactics and that sort of thing. Or it could be there's some personal stuff that's been pushed into the story as well, from personal experiences, um, themes, that sort of thing. So loss, tragedy, warring with duty, to your and that the choice between, sort of sacrificing yourself, your life, your everything for a greater purpose is very much a big theme scattered through a lot of my writing.
I believe you had mentioned in one of the chats that you just you just happened to start writing it while on duty, and like, for lack of a different way of saying it, it kind of like took a life of its own, as you were actually on duty.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was a couple of years there where I had way too much free time on my hands um, doing jobs and posted to a location away from my family and all that sort of stuff. So it gave me way too much time to think. And so one of the things I was doing to sort of deal with everything that was going on was to get heavily invested into writing. Um, I just saw the bunny ask about what made me write about the Elder Scrolls. um, I can expand on that a little bit with this as well. So, as my username suggests, it's Tyranidlord. Got a background with the whole Warhammer 40,000, and originally I was actually going to go down the path of writing licensed works with the Black Library Publishing Company, the guys who do everything for Games Workshop. The manuscript got rejected, but I did get a response back saying that they were interested in my stuff if I could polish my skills off. And so Elder Scrolls fell naturally into that. It's a very unique fantasy setting. The games themselves, I've been playing the games ever since Daggerfall came out in the early 90s. It went through Morrowind, Arena, Oblivion, and then Skyrim when it came out. The setting's uniqueness, the deities, the world building, the how there's a lot of different tropes that have been put on, like turned on their head. So, for example, the wood elves are carnivores, they're cannibals, they do not harm trees in any way, shape, or form, and they are almost violently aggressive. So they protect trees by breaking knees. There's steampunk robots involved, with the Dwemer, which that's a whole funny thing in itself, and one of the first things that got me interested in the lore playing Morrowind. Um, there's the dragons, which are dragons but not dragons. You've got the whole tonal architecture side of things, where the Song of Reality is actually, um, like creating a fabric. The universe itself is a wheel that's a tower. There's lots of deep metaphysical aspects to it, which just really drew me in. And as I got more and more interested with history, the more I started noticing all the not sure how to put it, the parallels to like ancient Sumerian lore, to a lot of like random esoteric cultures that are also put into it as well. So yeah, hopefully that wasn't me rambling too much.
Do you feel that the nature of the game gives you more freedom to be creative?
Oh, 100%. Um, you could get every single player who's ever played any of the games, and you ask them their take on the world building, what the stories are, everyone's motivations, and you will get a different answer every single time. Um, there is I've seen and heard it described before where a lot of the games are miles wide but only a few inches deep. Um, because that's a bit of the limitations, but also it's the way that they allow the players that creative freedom. The purpose of my stories in a lot of ways is I'm taking the depth and I'm increasing it dramatically. Like an example of that is in game, like if you just walk, you'll cross the entire province in like 15, 20 minutes. Uh, the provinces and Tamriel itself, the continent that all the games are set in the what I call the Blood Tide universe, is effectively Western Europe in scale. So
All right, okay, we might have another question coming. Yeah, like I was impressed, like definitely by like the voice as I heard it, like it's very immersively Nordic, at least as far as like this chapter, and it very much came across that way. And you did a really good job of like, placing the setting. Obviously, it's the beginning of book three, and so like there's a lot with like the world building and with the characters and plot that I haven't actually played, so I just came blind, but like no, like it was still definitely presented in a way that it could be enjoyable, and like I felt as though like Jack definitely like brought it out to life.
Wait, so Aiden, you have never taken an arrow to the knee?
I've never taken an arrow to the knee, no. But like but between his writing and your narration, like if there's an arrow to the knee, like somebody's gonna feel it.
So we're laughing 'cause that's just one of the most quoted jokes from the story. It's not actually part of the story, but there's this guy who's constantly like, I'd go out there and do things, but I took an arrow to the knee last week, and he just basically just that's part of the joke. Is just he's lazy because he took an arrow to the knee. But
yeah.
that'd be a great excuse, wouldn't it? I don't know about you guys. I wouldn't be doing much if I took an arrow to the knee.
Okay, so like on that note, like thank you for, the story, Tyranidlord. Thank you for reading, Jack. Thank you everybody for coming. It was wonderful. It was enjoyable. Another, Gemcast. And with that, does either of you guys have something else to say before we sign off?
The only last little one that I've got. This one is currently up on Archive of Our Own. It will eventually be on Royal Road as well, but not for quite a few months. So probably early mid 2026. It's I'll call it the prequel series is getting released in December on Royal Road.
Thank you for the
All right,
update,
Jack.
Mr. Posted.
Yeah, Jack, anything from you?
Nothing at all. Just thank you for the chapter. I hope to keep us posted as things go forward for you, and thank you again for allowing us to read your chapter.
Oh,
All
cheers
right, with
for
that,
reading.
that concludes this episode of Gemcast Live, and like we will be back next week.
Thank you, everybody.